No work today, the American guard said. His voice echoed through the freezing Montana yard. And for a moment, no one moved. The German women stood in their gray coats, breath turning white in the air. They waited for the whistle, the orders, the work, but none came. The guard spoke again, slower this time. It's Christmas. The word hung in the cold air like something fragile and out of place. Christmas, for prisoners? No one believed it. Then, from across the yard, came a smell. At first, it was faint, just a whisper of something carried by the wind, something warm, something that didn't belong in a prison camp. They stopped working, their shovels hanging in the air. One of the younger women lifted her head and sniffed again. "Do you smell that?" she asked in a voice almost afraid to hope. It was there again, stronger now, a rich, heavy scent that cut through the cold. Butter, cinnamon, roasted meat, the kind of smell that made your stomach ache and your heart remember. They looked at one another in silence. For months, the air had smelled only of wet wood, smoke, and bleach. But this smelled like someone's kitchen, like Sunday mornings before the war, like something human. Slowly, they followed the scent, drawn toward the long wooden building at the edge of the yard. The mess hall. It glowed faintly in the gray winter light, windows fogged with steam and breath. Yellow light spilled through the frosted glass, flickering like candlelight. Inside, silhouettes moved between tables, American cooks and guards, carrying trays and bowls. The women pressed closer, their boots crunching softly in the snow. Through the glass they saw what they could hardly believe. Tables covered in white linen, real plates stacked neatly, and in the center of each one, a small pine branch tied with a red string. Someone had decorated. For a moment, none of them spoke. The only sound was the wind brushing the fence and the soft hum of voices inside. Then the door creaked open. A wave of warm air rushed out, thick with the smell of roasting meat and bread. It wrapped around them like a memory, thawing something deep and fragile inside. For the first time in months, the air didn't smell like disinfectant, smoke, or fear. It smelled like butter melting on bread, like home, like Christmas. One woman covered her mouth, her eyes shining. Another whispered, maybe they made a mistake. But the warmth kept spilling out of the door. And in that moment, even if it was only for a breath, they wanted to believe the mistake was real. Inside, they froze again. But this time, it wasn't from the cold, it was disbelief. The sight before them didn't belong in a prison camp. Rows of long wooden tables stretched across the hall, covered with white linen cloths that looked freshly washed. Candles flickered at the edges, and in the soft glow, everything shimmered. The steam rising, the silver glint of cutlery, the gold of roasted skin. The smell was overwhelming now. Roasted turkey, buttered potatoes, the sweetness of pie crusts and apples. For a moment, they didn't move. They just stood there, staring, as if one blink might make it all vanish. Someone whispered, "It smells like home." Another murmured, "No, it smells even better." A few laughed softly, that awkward, trembling laugh that comes when you're trying not to cry. An American cook stood behind the counter, an older man with tired eyes and flour on his apron. He smiled when he saw them, a quiet, genuine smile that didn't need translation. Then he said something in English, slow, gentle. The translator, a young woman who spoke both languages, hesitated before speaking. Her voice was soft when she said, "He says take as much as you want. There's plenty." The words hung in the air. Plenty, a word that no one there had heard in years. They stepped forward one by one, holding out their plates, some chipped, some mismatched. The cook carved thick slices of turkey, the skin glistening with fat. He added a spoonful of mashed potatoes, a scoop of green beans, and when one woman tried to say enough, he just smiled and added another roll. The women moved to the tables, sitting slowly, carefully, as though afraid they might be punished for it. For a long moment, no one lifted a fork. They just stared at the food, at the steam rising from it, at the miracle sitting on their plates. Finally, one woman, young, thin, with eyes too old for her face, took a small bite. She chewed once, twice, then she stopped, lowered her fork, and covered her mouth. Her shoulders began to shake. She was crying. And soon, another joined her, and another, until the whole hall filled with the soft, broken sound of women weeping, not from hunger, not from pain, but from kindness. For the first time in a very long time, they were full. They weren't crying because they were sad. They cried because the food was good, because it was warm, because for once, they didn't have to fight for every bite. They cried because it was Christmas, because someone, somewhere, had decided that even enemies deserved a moment of grace. The sound wasn't loud, no sobs, no wailing, just quiet, trembling breaths and the soft clatter of spoons against plates. A few tried to hide their faces, pressing napkins to their eyes, but the tears came anyway, honest, uncontrollable. One woman whispered, "I forgot what kindness felt like," across from her. Another nodded, unable to speak, her hand resting gently on the table as if to steady herself. For one impossible morning, the people who had guarded them, who had barked orders and counted rations, were now serving them food, smiling at them, treating them as human. And that, more than the turkey, the pie, or the warmth, was what broke them. They cried because kindness, after so much cruelty, was its own kind of pain, the beautiful kind that reminded them they were still alive. When the meal was over, the hall grew quiet. Only the faint crackle of the stove remained. Then the door opened, and a young American with red hair stepped in, carrying a wicker basket. Inside lay a mound of oranges, bright, perfect, glowing like tiny suns against the gray of winter. He moved from table to table, placing one in each woman's hand. "Merry Christmas," he said gently. The woman from Dusseldorf held hers carefully, as if it were made of glass. She hadn't seen one in 3 years. The peel released a sharp, sweet scent, and for the first time since the war began, she smiled. That night, long after the lights in the barracks had dimmed, she sat by the small wooden table near the stove, a scrap of paper in front of her, the orange resting beside it like a tiny sun that refused to fade. Her hand still smelled faintly of butter and cinnamon. Her stomach was full, but her heart was even fuller, heavy with something she hadn't felt in years, peace. She dipped her pen into the ink and began to write. She wrote about the turkey, the way it melted on her tongue, about the pie, sweet, spiced, and warm, about the orange, bright as hope in a world gone gray, and about the American who had said, "No work today, it's Christmas." Her handwriting trembled, but her words were steady. When she reached the end, she paused for a long time. Then she wrote one final line. "Today, I remembered what it feels like to be human." Outside, snow fell softly over the camp, blurring the fences, silencing the guard towers. And for a single day, behind barbed wire and boundaries, war had paused for kindness. If this story touched you, subscribe for more powerful true moments from World War II, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because even in war, humanity finds a way.